Okay, I've just prepared a short video on a section of the exam, the HSC Geography exam, that I often find students have a lot of problems with, and often where students will lose a lot of marks and end up with a result that they often don't feel really reflects their ability. So I want to spend a bit of time talking about the short answer section of the exam. Okay, my general thoughts are that for a section that's out of 40 marks, it's often overlooked. It is actually the same amount of marks as the extended responses, and as much time as students put into doing those long responses, the short answer section of the exam provides an opportunity to get the same amount of marks, and you still got to be aware and able to discuss the whole course. I often find that there's a perception of success when students do the short answer section, that they feel they've done quite well in it, but you only have to look at it and realise that there's maybe 7 to 8 questions, and you only have to lose 1 mark and maybe 2 marks on one, or have one bad section, and you can quite easily lose 10 to 12 marks and end up, instead of getting, in the mid-30s to high 30s, ending up with a mark in the mid-20s and feeling like you've really not done anywhere near as well as you thought you had done when you sort of first come out of an exam. So what I want to do today is talk to you about how you can approach the short answers in a bit more of a systematic way, to ensure that you can be a bit more consistent, and that you approach the questions a bit more thoughtfully. My general feeling is, when I mark a student's short answers, is the sections of the exam, or the sections of the course they do well, they know well, they can answer well, but sections of the course that they don't feel as confident in, they tend to waffle through and just provide really general statements. My advice would be to take the Peel approach, which I've found very successful for my junior and my senior students, where you take a very systematic approach to answering these short answer questions, where the P is for point or a topic sentence. You then explain, provide an example, and then link back. And really importantly, with that linking sentence, depending on that directive verb, whether you're being asked to evaluate or to analyse, or just to identify, that you make sure you link back to that question. So let's have a bit of a look at it. So yeah, the point or the P, the topic sentence. The biggest tip that I'd be giving here is that you just the first thing you've got to be doing is rewording the question. In the short answers in all exams, you really press for time, so there's no need to be thinking about inventive or highly descriptive ways of using language. As a marker, we're looking to see if you've got an understanding and knowledge of the course. So reword the question, and then within that, try and include specific terms, phrases, and really importantly, words from the dot point. Geographic meta-language that comes out of the dot points from the syllabus. A good understanding of the syllabus will ensure that you're going to do well in the short answer section. In the explanation, explain key processes, definitions, or dynamics, whatever the question's asking you to do. Ensure that you've got meta-language, and once again, try and use language from previous dot points. If you can illustrate that you've got understanding of previous dot points, especially in some of the short answer questions that are worth sort of 6 to 8 marks, you're going to be expected to have an understanding of where in the course this comes from, and some of those key processes that come before and after the question that you might be looking at. For your example, you can often integrate this, and it's something that I generally do with my writing, but integrating your examples within your explanation, but making sure that you've got good case studies, so sample studies, smaller examples, statistics, quotes, data. Once again, I'm going to harp on this. Including those dot point terms in your examples is really going to help. It's going to help because it'll reflect back to the question, and it'll illustrate to the marker that you're answering the question. And then I guess lastly, the link. I guess this is time and space permitting. Also, depending on how much the question's worth, you may just not have time or the space to do it. Certainly for those 6 to 8 mark questions, really crucial when you're being asked in a question to evaluate, that you maybe have an evaluative statement, or if you're being asked to compare or contrast, you might have a linking sentence that does that comparison or contrast at the end. And I always say to my students, when you do that, underline it. That way it really draws the attention of the marker and shows them that you've done that. All right, so what I want to do now is go through a few examples of Mostly just the point, the topic sentence, and then as a starter. So what you need to be doing, I've just got questions here. I've just chosen 3 questions from the last sort of few years of the HSC. So here's one here. Why is it important to manage and protect ecosystems? Look, this comes straight out of this section here of the syllabus. So a student that knows the syllabus will know that when they're answering this question, they're going to have to talk about all of these. They're going to have to talk about these values here, the genetic diversity and natural change to proceed. The other thing that's really important here is understanding how many marks this thing's worth. At 6 marks, you're going to have to be talking about all of these, and really, you're going to have to mention all of them, probably go into depth with at least 3 and have examples of them as well. I've provided just my short example of how a student could systematically approach this topic sentence. I've just reworded the question, and I've included the meta language from the dot point. So it's important to manage and protect ecosystems. There's my rewording. And their functioning. You can see there I've included a term from the dot point prior. Due to their heritage, intrinsic and utility value, all of that there comes from the dot point. And also allowing natural change to proceed, also there coming from the dot point itself. You'd then go on, obviously, to explain some of these, explain maybe the utility, the intrinsic heritage value, explain why maintenance of genetic diversity is important, why natural change needs to proceed, and then give some examples of those. You might have a case study, the 2 case studies you do, or some sample studies, some good examples that you'd have there. But that there is a nice point. It's a topic sentence that would lead you on. Let's have a look at another one. So taking one now from the urban dynamics part of the course, or urban places part, and then the urban dynamics. So account for the social structure of a large city in the developed world. It's often a question that's really going to stump students. They'll see a question like this and maybe sometimes not quite understand where this comes from the course. So you can see here, it's this second dot point here, a case study result, the urban dynamics of a large city. And specifically here, the social structure is going to refer down to this little sub-dot point. So spatial patterns of advantage, disadvantage, wealth, poverty, ethnicity. So you're going to be having to look at some urban dynamics in here and focus on this little section. So I've written a little topic sentence. My point, the social structure and spatial patterns of advantage and disadvantage within the world city of Sydney have been shaped by a range of 9 urban dynamics. I've used the term world city there because it does come from the urban places unit prior. I've talked that there comes from the question, so I've reworded the question, then this is from the dot point, and then this also is from the dot point. I haven't gone in and actually mentioned all 9 urban dynamics. In my explanation, I would probably choose 2 to 3 dynamics, and here's a really important thing. In your example in this section, you need both suburbs as examples and data. Not just one or the other. If you only use one or the other, you're really leaving yourself a little bit exposed there. So try and have both suburbs within the large city and some data that can back that up. And when I talk about data, maybe ABS data or the social atlas data would be 2 good sources. All right, a last one coming from the people and economic activity section of the course, the 3rd section. Identifying 2 linkages within this economic enterprise and provide reasons for the link. Well, let's have a look firstly. It's out of 6. We're looking at an economic enterprise, and often another part of the course where students really get tripped up, focusing either on the economic activity or the enterprise. Make sure that you really, when you read this question, that you're under no illusion about what's part of the section or what part of the course you're looking at. So what we've got to do is we've got to look at 2 linkages. Obviously, this is coming from the enterprise here. You can see here, there's that link there. And the 2 linkages, we're looking at both internal and external linkages, and they can be of people, goods, flows and ideas. So I've written a short little sentence here. The economic enterprise of AW, which is the economic enterprise we look at, and I've just abbreviated there, experiences both internal and external linkages and flows, although that's not in the question, it is in the dot point, of people, goods, services and ideas When I explain it, I would then go into detail. I would talk probably really about one internal and one external, and with that I might talk about internal flows of people, and I might talk about external flows of ideas perhaps, or one of the others. And then I'd have the examples, and I'd provide reasons as well as the question asked. So some final thoughts. Look, I always find I have a lot of students. I generally have 2 or 3 students a year who will do very well in the multiple choice, very well in the extended response, and really struggle in the short answer. I've found this a really successful technique to teach them, to sit down with them, and if I go through the short answer paper maybe only 2 or 3 times, a student can drastically improve their mark, sometimes even gaining 10 to 12 marks just by systematically answering a question, a good knowledge of the syllabus, a good understanding of key processes and dynamics, examples, and just going through each question in a very, very particular way. I've often found gets students to that next level. I hope this has been helpful. Good luck.